Hello guys, welcome to my channel. None of the events mentioned are true and it didn't relate to the real life story. It is the imagination story and no idol is being harmed in the video. Hope you guys like the video. Please like, share and comment also and tell me that which type of stories you prefer the most. I will be very thankful to you. The morning had begun with a kind of perfection that seems scripted for fairy tales. The sun was sharp and golden, stretching its light across the white marble courtyard of the Gion family estate, where florists were still placing final arrangements of lilies and blush pink roses. Waiters in crisp uniforms rushed to and fro, balancing trays of crystal glasses. The sound of strings floated from the far corner of the garden where musicians rehearsed quietly. And in the midset of the orchestrated beauty, Jungkook heart was alive with anticipation. He stood before the mirror in his room, adjusting the cuffs of his tailor white sherwani. His affection was steady, but inside a song churned excitement, nervousness, and something softer, almost boyish, that only Hania had ever able to draw from them. She had been the girl he would fallen for without trying, the one whose laughter could make him forget entire days of stress. Today was the day she would walk towards him in silk and gold. The day he would finally be hers without hesitation, without boundaries. A knock came at his door. His mother, elegant as always in a cream sari, entered without waiting. "You look handsome, Jungkook," she said warmly, through her eyes, scanning his outfit for perfection either. Then his mood. "The guests are arriving. Your father wants you in the garden in 15 minutes." He nodded, smiling faintly. "Is Hania ready?" His mother lips curled. "She's always late, but she will be here. Don't worry." She patted his arms before slipping out, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Downstairs, Minnie was already busy with small duties assigned to her by the wedding planner. She moved quietly, unnoticed by most of the guests. The soft blue of her dress was understated compared to the glittering gowns around her, yet it suited her delicate features. She kept she kept her head down, arranging place cards, adjusting the folds of tablecloths, anything to keep her hands occupied. After all, this was her stepsister's wedding day, and she had promised herself she wouldn't let any complicated feelings surface. She had never resented Hania for being the favorite, not exactly. But it was impossible to ignore the way her father's second wife, Roxana, treated her like an afterthought while doting on Hania as if she were royalty. Minnie had grown used to being the background, the shadow in family photographs. The polite smile at celebrations today would be no different, except for the part of her heart that twisted every time they saw Jungkook look at Hanya as though she hung the star. The ceremony was set to begin at noon. By 11:45, the guests filled the rows of white chairs on the lawn. They chatted a soft home under the bright sun. Jungkook stood near the altar. His best man adjusted the fold of his stole. The air smelled faintly of rose and incense. Everything was perfect until the whispering began. At first, Jungkook didn't notice, but the hungry yogurt pockets of jazz moving through the crowd. His father approached, face pale, his jaw clenched. "Jungkook," he said in a low voice, "we need to talk inside now." Confused, Jungkook followed him into the mansion. His mother close behind. The steady Ruxana stood with a crumpled note in her trembling hands, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "She's gone," she said, her voice breaking. Jungkook pulse thud in his ear. "What do you mean, gone?" Ruxana thrust the note at him. He scanned it, his breath catching with every word. "I am sorry, I can't do this. I need more than this life can give me. Don't try to find me." She ran off, Ruxana whispered, collapsing into a chair with some man she met months ago. He promised her money, a better life abroad. She left early this morning. Jungkook's mind refused to process it. This had to be some twisted prank, a misunderstanding. Hanya wouldn't do this, not to him, not today. But the truth sat heavy in the silence. The note was real. She was gone. Outside, the guest was beginning to murmur louder, glancing toward the house. Word was spreading. His father's voice cut through the fog in Jungkook's mind. This is a disaster. The press is here, the family, the reputation. His mother gripped his arm. We can't let this turn into a scandal.
We need a solution. Jungkook barely heard them. His chest was tight, his stomach twisted. The image of Hanya in her wedding dress walking towards him shattered into jagged pieces. Then Ruxana looked up, her tears streaked her face, hardening. Her gaze shifted the doorway to where Minnie stood frozen, having just entered with the tray of tea she would be asking to bring. Ruxana's voice was sharp, almost desperate. She will marry him. Minnie blinked. What? You? Ruxana said again, pointing at her. You will marry Jungkook now, before the guest finds out the truth. Minnie heard her so loudly, she was sure they could hear it. That's impossible, she stamped. He doesn't. Her father entered then, his expression grave. It's the only way to save the family's honor, he said. If the ceremony goes ahead, no one will know. They will think it was always you. Hania's absence will never be spoken of. Jungkook turned to them, disbelief flaring. Are you insane? I was supposed to marry Hania. Minnie is your only option. His father interrupted, his tone final. You will go back out there and you will take her hand. This is the end of it. The silence had followed, suffocating Minnie's hand, trembling around the tray, her throat dry. She imagined being near Jungkook countless times, but not like this, not as a replacement, an afterthought, a pawn in a social game. Jungkook looked at her then, and the coldness in his eyes made her flinch. Fine, he said finally, his voice like steel. If this is what it takes to end this circus. The next half hour passed in a blur. Minnie was whisked away to a bedroom upstairs where the bridal team, confused but obedient, dressed her in the heavy gold and red lehenga meant for Hania. The dupatta felt suffocating over her head, the jewelry clinking like chains with her every movement. She stared at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the girl staring back. A girl about to be bound to a man who didn't want her, whose heart belonged to her stepsister. In the garden, the guests were told there had last-minute change of plans for social reasons, but that the ceremony would proceed. Jungkook stood waiting, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the crowd. When Minnie finally stepped out, the whispers began again, but now they were laced with curiosity rather than shock. She walked towards him, each step feeling heavier than the last. They stood by side as the official began the rituals, his voice calm and steady despite the undercurrent of tension between them. Jungkook barely looked at her, his response clipped, mechanical. Minnie's hands were cold, and when he touched him, it was only because the moment required it, not because he wanted to. By the time the ceremony ended and the guests erupted into polite applause, Minnie felt hollow. The garlands were exchanged, the vows cited, and just like that she was Mrs. John. A little should have meant something, but instead felt like an ill-fitting costume. The reception passed in a haze, guests congratulating them, posed for photographs, toasted by a beautiful couple. Jungkook played his part well enough, smiling faintly, thanking people, but the stiffness never felt his posture. Minnie kept her own smile in place, though every muscle in her face edged. When the last guest had gone and the house finally fell silent, they found themselves alone, the dimly lit hallway outside the room that was now in name theirs. Jungkook broke silence for his voice low but sharp. Don't think for a second that this changes anything. I didn't choose you, Minnie. Remember that. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I know. He turned away, pushing the door open. Good. The marriage is just a formality, nothing more. And with that, he stepped inside, leaving her inside the hallway, the weight of the day pressing down on her until she could barely breathe. Somewhere deep down, a part of her still hoped that things might one day change. But for now, she was nothing more than the bride who had replaced another. The first week of their marriage unfolded not like gentle beginning of a love story, but like a long winter, silent, cold, and heavy with unspoken things. The house felt larger than it had before, though many suspected it was only because Jungkook's presence seemed to draw all warmth away from the room they shared. Jungkook had buried himself in work almost immediately after the wedding. Every morning he would leave before breakfast, returning late at night when the corridors were quiet and the staff had retreated to their quarters. If Minnie happened to be awake, sitting in the corner of the bedroom with a book or a half-finished embroidery piece, he would give her a curt nod, mutter a faint good night, and retreat into the bathroom. Conversation between them were fictional and best short, clipped exchanges about the day schedule, an event they were expected to attend together. In Jagup's mind, the woman living in this house was nothing more than a stand-in for the one he had lost. Every time he caught sight of a Minnie's face in the soft lamplighting or in a reflection of a window, a strange edge grabbed him, because she was not Hanya, and yet she shared the same quiet eyes, the same curve of the mouth, enough resemblance to make him remember the betrayal. Hanya's note still haunted him in moments he was alone. I need more than this life can give me. Those words had carved themselves into him like a cruel brand. It didn't matter that Minnie had written them. He convinced himself that she could have. After all, wasn't she Hanya's sister, raised in the same household, shaped by the same stepmother ambition? To him, she was simply another buyer of the same greed, dressed in the different shade of silk. And so, when Minnie tried, timidly at first, to bridge the distance between them, her efforts were met with an invisible wall. One evening, she gathered the courage to knock out in his study room, holding a tray of tea she had prepared herself. He looked up from his desk, pen still poised above paper, and his gaze flickered briefly over her. I thought you might like something warm, she said softly, setting the tray down. He didn't thank her. You don't have to do this, he replied, his tone flat. We have staff for a reason. I wanted to, she murmured, fingers brushing in the edge of teacup. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Is this how you plan to play it? Her brows knit. Play what? This sweet, innocent act, he said, the words sharp enough to make her flinch. I have seen it before with Hanya. It started the same way. Gentle smile, thoughtful gestures, and the end, all she wanted was more. More money, more attention, more control. You are her sister, Minnie. Don't think I did not notice a pattern. The sting of his accusation lodged in her throat. She wanted to defend herself, to tell him that she had never been like Hanya, that she had never asked for anything but peace. But the weight of his gaze, so cold and unyielding, made her words die before they reached her lips. I am not her, she said quietly instead. He gave a short, harmless laugh. We will see. And with that, he turned back to his paperwork, dismissing her without another glance. Minnie left the study with her hands trembling, the untouched tea still sitting in his desk. That night she cried silently into her pillow, careful not to let him hear. Days blurred together in much the same way. Meals are often eaten in silence, the clink of cruelty on proclaim the only sound between them. When they attend social gathering, they played their part flawlessly. Jungkook, the attentive husband, Minnie, the poised wife, two outsiders they look perfect, but in private the interactions were like ice, smooth on the surface, but cold enough to burn. What Jungkook never noticed, or perhaps refused to notice, was the way Minnie moved through the house with quiet dignity despite the loneliness that clung to her. She remembered everyone's birthday among the staff, made sure the flowers in the hallway were always fresh, and never once complained when Jungkook cancelled a dinner or left without explanation. She carried the weight of his disdain like a secret, never letting it show in public, never allowing it to crack the gentle smile she wore when people were watching. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves alone in the living room, the sound of the storm outside filling the silence between them. Jungkook was scrolling through his phone when Minnie gathered a courage she had been holding for weeks spoke. Why do you hate me so much? The question made him pause, his thumb hovering over the screen. He looked up to her eyes, narrowing slightly. I don't hate you. It feels like you do, she said, her voice steady but soft. You don't speak to me unless you have to. You don't look at me unless someone else is watching, and when you do, it's like I'm something you would rather not see. For a moment, her expression flickered, something unbearable passing through his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by the same guard coolness. You are imagining things. She let out a small, harmless shriek. Maybe I am. Or maybe you're just determined not to see me as myself. He didn't respond. Instead, he set his phone aside, stood, and left the room without a word. The sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. Minnie sat there for a long time after he was gone, staring at the rain streaking the windows. She had entered this marriage knowing it would never be built on love, but she hadn't expected the loneliness to feel quite this sharp. Still, she decided that she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. If she had to live in the shadow of his resentment, she would do it with her head held high, even if it meant swallowing every hurt in silence. The Gion mansion, with its gleaming marble floors and sweeping staircases, was meant to be a piece of comfort, but to many it felt like a labyrinth of closed doors and cold hearts. She moved through it quietly, like a guest, overstaying her welcome. Always be careful not to step in the wrong place or spring at the wrong time. If Jungkook's silence towards her was a wound she had learned to bear, his family treatment was salt poured on it. His mother, Mrs. John, regarded her with polite detachment when guests were present, but in private, her tone turned clipped. Her instruction pricks the impersonal. Minnie was assigned small, deeming the task under the guise of helping out, fetching tea for relatives, clearing the table after meals, arranging flowers in the guest room. It was not the work itself that stung, but the way it was given, as though she were a servant. She was a servant in her own home. The roast, however, was Reba, Jungkook's cousin, who seemed to relish reminding Minnie of her place. Ariba was a fixture in the house, draped in expensive fabrics and armed with a smile that could cut. She spoke to Minnie in sweet tones when others were near, but once they were alone, her words grew sharp. Careful with those cuffs, Ariba would say as Minnie softly. They cost more than your entire wardrobe. Minnie never replied. She had learned long ago that silence was safest armor, but the barbs lodged deep all the same. Jungkook, when was home, rarely witnessed these moments. When he did, he seemed to brush them off, convinced Minnie was either overreacting or used to such treatments. In truth, he barely looked up from his work or his phone long enough to notice, and yet there was cracks, small ones, in the wall he kept between them. One evening, Minnie was in the kitchen helping the staff prepare dinner. The cook's young son, barely 6 years old, had wandered in, clutching his knee and trying not to cry. Minnie knelt beside him gently, cleaning the scrape and sticking a cartoon banner over it. She smiled, ruffling his ear, and whispered something that made him giggle through his ears. But she didn't realize that Jungkook had just stepped into the doorway. He paused, watching the scene with an expression he couldn't quite name. That was nothing calculated in the way she comforted the boy. No performance, no mantle. It was genuine, quiet warmth. For response, he didn't want to examine. It unsettled him. Later that night, when he passed her in the hallway, he found himself slowing just enough to look at her. She was carrying a tray of tea for his mother, her head slightly bowed, a few strands of hair falling loose from her braid, and in the end, she didn't notice him watching. Something about the way she moved, graceful despite the weight she carried, made him feel strangely restless. He told himself it didn't matter, that her kindness was probably just another layer of the act he was sure she was playing. But the image of her kneeling beside the child lingered uninvited in his mind. Minnie, meanwhile, felt the weight of the house pressing harder with each passing day. Meals were often eaten in silence, broken only by polite conversation between Jungkook and his mother. With Minnie sitting quietly at the far end of the table, if she spoke, the response was short, dismissive. It was easier to keep her head down, to let their words wash over her like cold rain. But even the strongest silence have cracks. Sometimes late at night when the house was still, she would sit by the window in her bedroom, her knees pulled to her chest, staring out at the lights of the city. She would wonder what her life might have been if Hania hadn't run away, if she had ever been pushed into this marriage. And yet, even in her quiet despair, she found small pockets of purpose, checking on the staff, helping the gardener choose flowers for the season, making sure the house ran smoothly in ways no one noticed. She took care of people, even those who barely acknowledged her existence. Jungkook noticed more than he wanted to admit. He saw her pose to help a maid carry a heavy basket up the stairs. He hovered her, reminding the driver to rest because he had been working all day. And each time something unsteady shifted in him. He didn't understand it. She was supposed to be like Hania, self-cerning, manipulative, ambitious. That was narrative he had built to protect himself. But the more he saw of her, the harder it became. It became to fit her into that mold. Still, instead of softening, he retreated further into distance. If he acknowledged her kindness, he might have to admit he had been wrong, and but that was something he wasn't ready to face. Minnie, unaware of the conflict brewing quality in his mind, continued her days as though she were invisible. She told herself it didn't matter if Jungkook saw her for who she was. She had survived worse than cold stares and sharp words, but deep down she couldn't stop wishing that, just once, he would look at her and not see his mistake. The morning began like any other with Minnie to help overseas breakfast preparations. The kitchen was warm with a second of parachuts sizzling on the griddle and fresh tea steeping in corner pots. She moved between the counters quietly, offering hand to the cook and arranging the fruit platter with careful precision. Upstairs, Jungkook was on his way, but his mother intercepted in the corridor. Her voice was low but sharp, as if she meant to keep her words between them. I had lunch with Mrs. Han yesterday. She began, her expression tinged with the satisfaction of someone who enjoys delivering unpleasant news. She says, people are talking. The thing Minnie's marriage into his family was calculated, that she is no different from her sister. Some even say she was probably hoping Hania would run away so she could take her place. Jungkook joked, and you believe that? His mother raised an elegant brow. I am simply saying the rumors are there. People didn't invent such things without reason. Keep your eyes open, Jungkook. Woman like that. She let the sentence trail off, the implication loud in silence. By the time Jungkook reached his office later that morning, the words had lodged like splinters under the skin. He told himself he didn't care what society thought, but deep down, the gossip confirmed. He would been telling himself since the wedding that Minnie was just another variant of Hanya, waiting for her moment to show her true colors. That evening, when he returned home, he found Minnie in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor as she organized a stack of books that had been left in disarray. The warm lamplight softened the lines of her face, but instead of feeling moved, he felt a surge of irritation. Enjoying yourself? He asked, his tone and with sarcasm. He looked up, startled. I was just putting this back into order. They were. Of course you were. He cut in, dropping his bag on the couch. Always making yourself look useful. Always so perfect. Her brow knitted in confusion. I'm just trying to help. Help? He repeated with a short, harmless laugh. Is that what you call it? Or is it just another way to make people think you are the selfless, innocent one? You know, Minnie, I hear this thing too. I hear people you say you are just like Hanya. Then you are waiting in the wings for your chance to marry into this family. Convenient, isn't it? She runs away, and suddenly you are the bride. The words landed like blows. Minnie's hands tilt over the books, her pulse thudding into her eyes. That's not true, she said quietly, her voice trembling despite her best effort to keep it steady. Isn't it? He pressed his eyes hard. Maybe you are better at hiding it than she was, but it's only a matter of time before I see the real you. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. You already decided who I am before you even bothered to know me. For a moment, something flicked into his expression. Doubt, perhaps, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He shook his head, muttering, believing what you want, before turning and walking out, leaving her in the vast silence of the room. Minnie didn't move for a long time. When she finally did, it was only to gather the books in trembling arms and place them back at the shelves. Her vision blurred, and by the time she reached their bedroom, the first cheer had escaped. She sat at the edge of the bed, her back straight as though sheer posture could keep her from breaking. But the words replayed into her mind. Each one remembered that in Jungkook's eyes, she could always be Hanya's shadow, someone's defined by another. Hope you all guys like the video, and please tell in comment section that if you want to make and changing to this video, and do you like the storylines, and what type of stories do you prefer. Please tell in comment section so I could make stories like that. Hope you all guys like the video, and I have attempted to do everything that the story will looks good, and don't spread hate. I write the story with my whole heart, and don't break it. Thank you so much for watching. Please share them to your friends. If someone likes my stories, I will be very thankful to all of you. Please subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye.